Most of you requested a tutorial on how I made this bustier corset, so you are welcome to Olives, and in this video I'll walk you through the process of drafting a bustier corset, so please keep on watching. Here is the starting line, and this is also the center front line. My paper is the exact measurement I need to draft. Okay, so for you to get this amount of paper, divide the widest part or your scale into two. That's the widest part of your measurement. Okay, and add extra 2 inches. Mine is 38 divided by 2 is 19 plus 2 inches is 21. This calculation helps you not to waste your paper. Okay, whatever measurement we had was half of our total measurement. Okay, so you have to now divide it into 2 equal parts so as to get the front and the back right. Now at this point you can also decide to just draft your front separately and then your back separately instead of having both front and back together. Okay, hope that makes sense. Dividing 21 by 2, I have 10.5 for both front and back. So I'm going to mark this 10.5 just to have a midpoint that will separate the front from the back. We will then continue by inputting your shoulder to chest. And then this will be marked across the paper. Shoulder to nipple, shoulder to under bust, shoulder to your natural waist or your half length, and then the length of your full top, your usual full top. Okay, maybe it might end at the hip area. Now you have to mark this across the paper once again. The back excludes shoulder to nipple and shoulder to under bust. Here is now your center front. The next thing is to input half of your shoulder measurement. Mine is 15 divided by 2 is 7.5. So you input this right from the center front and you repeat the same thing on your chest line. Put this to straight line or broken lines. And repeat the same thing for the back. Now what we are trying to do here is to draft a basic bodice and then draft our bustier. Okay, make sure all measurements start from both center front and center back. Okay, now the next thing also is to include your neck width. Okay, we are not really concentrating on this, so just going to use standard measurement of 3 by 3 inches. And then shoulder slope of 1.25. You then connect this to the neckline as shown. Repeat the same thing for the back, but the depth for the back is going to be 1 inch. And then the shoulder slope for the back will be 1 inch as well. On the back like this, find the midpoint and then go in from the midpoint by ½ inch. For the front, I'll go up by 3 inches from the chest line and 0.75 from the midpoint. Connect this midpoint to meet the shoulder slope. On the chest line, find quarter of your bust and measure that right from your center front. Repeat the same thing for the back, but this time around add extra 0.25 for a reason that will be explained as we move ahead. Okay, so connect the armholes together. Now on your waistline, find quarter of your waist and then add 1 inch dart to your result. Okay, so mine is 7 plus 1 inch, that is 8. Now you can also decide to use 1.5, 2 inches dart. So whatever you want to use, add to your waist measurement. So I'll try to use 1.5 first on your hip quarter of your hip measurement, or wherever your top stops. Okay, measure around that side. Connect all these points together. I will now measure my initial waist plus 1 inch that I want. So that is 8. I'll definitely maintain my hip and reconnect everything together. Hope everything makes sense now. On the back, we are going to tighten the back. So I'll take off ½ inch from the waist, and then you can either connect it to the chest line or the midpoint of this area. Okay, so I'll connect this to the midpoint and also connect to the hip. Okay, now you can see 0.5 taking off from the chest line. That is the reason for the 0.25 added to the initial quarter of bust. Okay, that back tightening usually helps to prevent zip bulge. So whatever measurement you are using starts from the new center back line. Okay, so repeat the same quarter of the waist plus 1 inch dart, and as well as quarter of your hip, and connect all these points together. Moving on, find half of your bust band or nipple to nipple and measure this from the initial center back. Measure it on your hip line, your waistline, and your chest line. On the waistline of your point, mark ½ inch on both sides as that. Okay, now you are going to connect this to the hip line. If your main length of top stops at the hip or is around the hip area, go up by 1 inch, but mine is above the hip, so I'm not going to make use of 1 inch from the hem. Okay, so I'm just going to connect my darts together. Please don't get confused. Okay, we are going to use our normal full length before we determine the length of our corset top. Okay, so this is how the back is looking like. We'll do the same thing for the front. Half of your bust band, you mark this on the waist, under bust, and nipple point. So you connect all of these to a straight line. Mark ½ inch on both sides. Now if the front you added 1.5 or 2 inches to your waist, then use total that of 1.5 or 2 inches. Okay, I added 1 inch, that is why I use ½ inch on both sides, if that makes sense. Okay, next, find half of your shoulder like this. Mark and connect the point to the nipple point. We will move on by dividing our round under bust by 4. So mine is 29 divided by 4 is 7.25. So I'm going to mark this from the center of my paper, and there will be an excess after marking this. This excess is going to be used to contour or tighten the under bust. Okay, so I have less than 1 inch. What I always advise is that whatever excess you have, make sure that you mark just ½ inch or less towards the center of your paper. Okay, does that make sense? So make sure you mark just ½ inch or less. Okay, so if you have 1 inch, 1.5, 2 inches, just make sure that you have ½ inch or less towards the center of your pattern, and the excess goes to the side of your pattern. Okay, whatever measurement you are going to mark should start from the other two dart legs. Okay, so I'm going to mark 0.25 for myself towards the center front, and away from that 0.25 that I've marked, I'll mark the excess towards the side. If you add both, that will make up for your excess. So connect from here to here, that's the underbars, to the waist, and then the other side as well. Then connect the underbars to the nipple point line. Next, measure your cleavage length or your shoulder to wherever you want the bustier to start, like off shoulder. Okay, so I am making use of 6 inches. You can do 5.5, 5 or 6.5. Okay, we need to tighten this area, and to do this I am going to use 0.75 on both sides of this shoulder dart line. Okay, now please take note that the higher you go, for example 5 or 4.5, the more dart intake you need to use, because your fullness is not close to your chest, it's around the bust or the nipple area. So if you go higher, or if you want higher off shoulder, then you need to tighten that area very well. So I'm going to connect with a straight line like this to the nipple point. If you tend to have any pointy bust around the nipple line, use the curve to blend them together as shown. This part will be cut off. If you follow me, I always say that one of these dart legs is always longer than the other, so try closing the dart, just the top part like this, and then blend them together. You could see this shortage here, so blend it. The next thing is to input your real length, that's the actual length of corset top you want. So I'm going to use 21.5, and you mark this across your paper. Okay, you can also maintain the normal length if that is what you are going for. You will go ahead and shape the bottom part of this top. Okay, so you can go in from the edge or the hem of your top by 1 inch on both front and back, or 1.5. okay, so you use your curve to connect to the center front or the center back. You can also decide to just mark 2 inches below your waist or 3 inches below your waist, that is your natural waist. Okay, I'm just trying to show you the numerous ways you can shape your hem. Okay, or you can just keep it straight if that is what you are going for as usual. Okay, and also note that however you use your curve affects the result of your top. Okay, so I'll make use of 1.5 from the hem. Okay, and I'll use my curve to connect it as I want. Also repeat the same thing for the back. You can decide to also keep the back straight or curve it. Okay, if you want a sweetheart effect, mark down how deep you want your sweetheart to be and connect that with a curve, or you can keep it straight. Okay, also connect this to the chest line if that is where you want, or above the chest line or below the chest line. Okay, so I'm just going to keep the chest line and curve it. The back will start from the chest line. Okay, so this is how I've marked out the front, just highlighted the important part. Now for the center back, I'll straighten the dart up like this to cut off the dart. My new center back, I'll mark 2 inches, and at the lower part I'll mark 1.5. So I'll connect all these points together. So we are trying to take off this part from the center back to be able to get the opportunity to lace our corset. Okay, Also shape out your back. Remember, you can shape the back your way, okay? So we'll have our eyelets or loops here. I'll draw out with marker the main patterns. Side front, side back, and then the center back. I'll cut all my patterns out. You can decide to also add your side seam allowance right on the pattern paper. After all done, you add allowance to the seam lines. That's the part that will be joined together. Add your desired side seam allowance. Also add allowance to the center back. Add allowance to the hem as well as the neckline or the top part of your corset. Please pardon me, okay? For some reasons I won't be able to post the sewing tutorial, okay? I do have similar tutorials on this channel. I'll put all the links in the description box so you can check them out, okay? Do like the video if you learned a thing or two. Please subscribe to the channel and turn on the notification bell so whenever I upload a new video you'll be notified. Thank you for watching. I'll see you in the next one.